want to welcome you again to Prairie Grains. I'm going to be your moderator for the marketing panel. We're going to touch on not just marketing, but a lot of other topics as you see. My name is Shane Isney. I am a farmer up in Roseau County. I also serve on the Minnesota Farm Bureau Board of Directors, and I represent Northwestern Minnesota. And you may wonder how you get the job as moderator. Well, they were looking for somebody. They said, well, we got to have somebody who likes to talk, and they don't necessarily have to have a lot of knowledge. And they said, let's go ask Shane. But no, we got a great panel with us this morning. Really a wide range of specialties these four have. We've got some that are very specialized and know the local markets and things, and then worldwide. So we're going to cover a little bit of everything in our time here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our panel to give a little introduction rather than have me introduce them all. And we're going to have them give a little background and start talking about some of the things that they want to talk about or what's their specialties. And then we'll open it up for questions after they get done with their initial spiel. And so I think we'll, if you want to do that, we're going to start on the end there, and then we'll work our way this way. And like I said, 5-6 minutes or however much time you want with each person. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. So my name is Tom Slenica. I'm the CEO for Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council. The office is in Mankato, Minnesota, but we run the county organization programs all throughout the state. We're very proud of that structure. Minnesota is the only state in the nation that has organized county organizations that then support the state. So we think it's a great mechanism to make sure that while the office might be in one part of the state, that we do get the feedback from the entire state. So the Research and Promotion Council has been around for a long time. I have to also say thank you for all of you that pay soybean checkoff, and double thank you to those that buy memberships to the association. Those two organizations run out of the office, but they handle different aspects of soybean business. So the Growers Association is the group that you pay the dues to. They handle all the political side, and the checkoff is what's doing the research and the promotion. And both have been very, very successful in the last few years with some of the initiatives that got started really 10, 20 years ago. But some of these things take a lot of time to build. But it's important to know that your checkoff dollars do not support any of the legislative work that is done any of the legislative work that is done in St. Paul. So those two organizations, while they work together, they do have to do some separate things. But some of the great things that we've been working on that are impacting your bottom line today are issues like biodiesel. Now, we all know about biodiesel in Minnesota. We lead the nation in the fact that 20% in the summertime, 20% of all fuel is biodiesel in Minnesota. No other state has that. That's a great example of how the checkoff organization helped develop those businesses, helped develop the technology, and then the legislative arm helped to bring that through by creating the mandate that makes that 20% possible. But we've just scratched the surface on what biofuels is going to mean to the region, the nation, and the world. And the initiatives that got started 15, 20 years ago are really, really going to hit home in the next couple of years when we see some of these renewable diesel plants get built. Right now, the driving factor, you all listen to the same markets that I do, that oil price has just gone through the roof. Now, why is that? Are we consuming more oil? Well, not for humans and not for animals, but it's all going to renewable diesel and biodiesel. And that's happening because we've proven time and time again to be the preferred fuel for creating a better environmental type of liquid product. And California and the whole West Coast is just going nuts over it. So this is going to be the driving factor for oilseeds, I think, for probably better than 2 decades. At some point in time, something else will come along, but you can say, well, 2 decades, that's 20 years, that's a long time. But you got to realize that it took us 20 years to get here. So we're just now going to start harvesting that benefit that was built by farmers on these boards 20-some years ago. So it's a really exciting thing. But with all that oil demand, what are we going to do with all that meal? So as we're all hearing the news, we've got crush plants coming up all over the United States. So some of the existing crush plants are doubling their capacity, and that's going to that's going to take away a whole lot more of that soybean that we once exported. And then of course we have 3 plants that are suggested to be coming up soon here in North Dakota, and we've got a couple new ones that are being designed for Minnesota, one of which our group is helping to lead. So that means that, fine, we've got a market for that oil, but what are we going to do with all that meal? So historically, we sent all those whole beans out to the West Coast in this region. And now we're going to have to send all that meal? I don't know. What does that mean to the international marketplace? If you look at China, China has double the crush capacity of the United States. Does that mean they're going to idle all of those crushing plants? Or are they going to compete to buy your meal and compete against our local new crush plants? This dynamic is where it's hard to tell how this thing's going to play out. But I can tell you that we are in 2022 is the starting point of what we're going to see is a major change in 2023. When these crush plants all come online, even if they don't all come online, but most of them do, you're going to see a dramatic change in what we're exporting, how we're exporting, the export demand from the U.S. versus South America. Because South America is not increasing their crush capacity at the same rate because they don't have the biofuels mandate that was created here in the U.S. So that dynamic is going to change a lot. The other thing that we've got to think about is, do we have enough capacity to ship that much meal off the West Coast? So we have great capacity to ship whole beans, but shipping meal is a whole other thing. It's complicated, it's gritty, it's dirty, it takes extra space, it takes extra time. In the winter times, you know, the product bridges and the rail cars. There's just a whole lot of extra work into shipping meal. And we have not expanded our meal shipping capacity on the West Coast to get ready yet for all of this to crush capacity. So I don't have a crystal ball as to how this is going to turn out, but I can tell you that soybean prices should remain high for some time. Animal production looks good, so the meal demand here in the U.S. looks good. This oil demand is going to continue to grow, and as more and more of these plants get built, that oil price is going to drive the soybean price. But I'm also definitely afraid of what we're going to do with all of this meal. So some of the, I don't know how we're doing on time here, I should have had a clock on. Okay. So some of the other things that we've been working on to help anticipate for this, I mentioned that there's a new crush plant going up in Minnesota, and it's called the Ag Innovation Campus, and I'll be talking about it in more detail at one of the breakout sessions. But it's a small plant that's going to be designed to help get new products to the marketplace. So this is a 240-ton-a-day plant. All the dirt work is done, the building has been ordered. It'll be crushing by September of next year is our goal. But it's a different kind of crush plant. It's all about how do we create the next new oilseed. Is it going to be penny crust? Is it going to be camelina as far as cover crops go? Now, up here, cover crops, I don't know if we're going to get that to work out up here or not, but certainly in southern parts of the state and below Minnesota, cover crops might actually start to work out pretty well. But who's going to prove out that that cover crop is profitable? Because no farmer is going to plant that seed and just for the fun of it. If we can harvest it and get a little bit of oil out of it, make a little, maybe figure out how to make that a wash or slightly a positive, cover crops may come on. But we're going to have to figure out how to get value for that. That means that someone's going to have to harvest it, crush it, test it in oil markets, whether it be fuel or human or animal, and that takes a facility designed to be able to do that. And in today's market, it doesn't exist anywhere. So we're really excited to be behind that effort and making sure that that comes to fruition. The other things that we're working on are new and different kinds of soybean varieties. So you've all heard about high oleic soybeans. So that's one that's coming on. We're doing that through the U of M, and we have a breeding program there. So, but it's not the only one. We've got soybeans that are healthier from a human aspect. We've got one that is a non-allergenicity bean. So that means it's implemental for baby formulas or adding more to the hog ration because the because the meal doesn't have the same allergenicity issue for baby pigs. So we've got a whole host of these new beans, and then hopefully they'll be tested in Crookston, and then they'll be introduced very quickly into this region because of the crush plant that we're going to build in Crookston, we'll be able to make sure that those varieties are available to this audience first. And I think it's pretty exciting. I think it's a really good use of our checkoff dollars that come from this audience. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much again for what you guys do to make sure that I have the opportunity to tell you what we're doing with the checkoff dollars.
Thank you, Tom. Pat, you want to go ahead?
My name is Pat Knudsen. I'm the grain manager for CHS Milman. Been doing this for about 12 years now. And our business unit is kind of based on the Highway 59 corridor between Highway 10 and Highway 2. We have 2 shuttle loaders. We load on the CP and the BM.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, go ahead.
My name is Jeff Beaudry. I'm from Ariel, Minnesota. I farm with my son up there. I farmed for 40 years. We farm a wide array of crops. I'm also a marketing specialist for Ag Country Farm Credit Services. I've been with them for 36 years. I specialize in input costs, marketing plans, cost of production numbers, and I meet with a huge amount of customers every year to try to find out break-evens and the cost of production. I service 13 different ag countries, going from Maddock, North Dakota, all the way to Bemidji, all the way to Roseau, and down south to Crookston. So I specialize mostly in the inputs, risk management, marketing plans, and trying to get everybody going for the year. Thank you.
So thank you. I'm Jim Peterson. I work as Policy and Marketing Director for the North Dakota Wheat Commission. Work very closely with a lot of your staff and board members of the Minnesota Wheat Council. And I apologize to the other panelists if you want to shift chairs or whatever. But I'm going to use a few slides. Unlike Daryl Richardson, I am going to do PowerPoint or death by PowerPoint, but hopefully not. But I'm used to talking with slides, so I'm just going to give a quick overview of how U.S. wheat, hardwood spring wheat in particular, is promoted overseas, what are our strengths, as well as get into some of what are some challenges coming down the road. So, I know many of you are very familiar with hardwood spring wheat. You've grown it a number of years, you've tried to market it to elevator, when you've got quality issues, you're enjoying very strong price premiums we're seeing this year, so it certainly has the good years and the bad years. But to put it in bigger context in the international market, it's known for its high protein content, high vitreous kernels, strong dough, high water absorption, and big loaf volumes. And you don't hear that at the elevator when you haul your wheat in, but that's why customers buy hardwood spring wheat. And because of that, it's ideal for a blending wheat, either to raise protein content or protein quality. Our primary competitor is Canada, but we also do see some limited competition from Germany, Australia, Kazakhstan. And I think one thing that we can hang our hat on is we're less than 2% of global wheat production, but we're 4.5% of global trade. So we have a very good demand base internationally. Just quickly, these are some of the products it's used for. A lot of your high-end pizza crusts, bagels, and then in the Asian market, it's also used in noodles. But like I said, a lot of its value is too for a blending wheat. If we look at the protein spectrum of world wheat exporters, we're in pretty rare air in terms of being the highest protein content wheat available in the world market, followed by Canada, and then you have a whole bunch of countries here in the middle, and that's what we want to stay out of. This is where the most intense price competition is, and that's why in my later slides I'm going to talk a little bit about quality. We want to maintain this area up here. That's where the premium prices are, less competition. Where does our wheat go each year? 50% stays right here in the U.S. And then we have North and South Asia. It's the big demand center. Accounts for about a third of our overall demand, but if you equate that just for the export share, that's 70% of our exports. So that's why the Pacific Northwest port is so critical. And even a lot of the wheat you grow here in Minnesota does make it out to the PNW. A year like this year where Montana had a devastating drought, if not for a lot of the Minnesota wheat production, northeast, eastern North Dakota, we'd be in pretty dire straits. So there's a lot of good wheat moving that way. You'll notice that we have very little wheat that we sell into the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, and that's a good thing, because that's the lowest priced wheat in the world market. And it's being dominated by the Black Sea region, the EU. There are some higher end buyers like Saudi Arabia that need some of our high protein wheats, but Asia is where it's at for us. This is a chart on domestic use. It's the only one I have. So in our U.S. domestic market, in the meal grist, the majority of the wheat is hardwood winter, just because it's typically, a 12 protein. It's the most available, the largest class produced. But you can see hardwood spring has a pretty good growth trend, and we'll get into that a little bit later, some of the new products. This year is an anomaly. Obviously with the devastating drought, the high prices right at harvest, more available hardwood winter. USDA is projecting that U.S. mills will make a pretty good wholesale shift to hardwood winter. I think they're overstating hardwood winter and understating the use of hardwood spring. But nonetheless, we are seeing less demand pull from our domestic market this year, just simply because of price premiums. If we look at international wheat marketing, that's primarily done through U.S. Wheat Associates. Your state checkout dollars are matched 2.5 to 1 by USDA. And with that fund, pay staff, conduct marketing programs. Some of you probably have served on the Minnesota Wheat Council board and maybe have traveled overseas and seen some of the activity. Obviously with COVID, it's a whole new world. Everything's kind of virtual. We are starting to maybe do a little bit more in person, but the main thing I tell producers is we help facilitate purchases by interacting with customers before the sale, after delivery. And we also engage with government agencies, and this is becoming a bigger area of focus. Chemical residues, mycotoxins, weed seed limits that constrain sales are becoming more common in a lot of countries. This is just a map of U.S. Wheat Associates world markets, where our offices are. So we have very extensive coverage. What are a few demand strengths for hardwood spring wheat? For one is we have a very consistent demand base. A lot of traditional customers that pay premium prices relative to the world market, and that's essentially because limited sources of the type of wheat that we produce here. What are our growth categories? Refrigerated and frozen dough products. This was probably going a little bit stronger pre-COVID. With COVID, obviously a lot more in-home isolation, a lot more direct in-home baking. But I think this will pick up again, as the economy continues to pick up and jobs. Whole wheat products. I know there's a lot of wheat being developed with higher fiber, but hardwood spring wheat fits in very well for the whole wheat product demand. And then clean labels. When you purchase a bag of bread or any other baked product, there's a lot of big, long syllable, multiple letter words on there that you don't know about. Well, those are additives that have been added to improve bread quality, taste, texture, shelf life. And now more bakers, not just in the U.S. but internationally, are trying to get more power from the flour and less additives. It's a cleaner label, more appealing to consumers. That's a growth market for spring wheat. And then South Asia is our big international demand. What are some of our threats? I think maintaining our edge in quality. Tom talked about the growth in soybean demand, oilseeds. In North Dakota, it's canola as well. So those mega trends are really raising the bar that wheat needs to have that higher yield to compete with the higher values come from oilseeds. So I think it's really going to be on us to make sure that we keep our quality as we continue to press that yield bar on our wheat varieties. And when I'm talking quality, not just protein, but our functional quality. We talked about the increasing concerns about allergens, chemical residues, wheat seeds. You may not notice it, but I guarantee you the shippers of your wheat locally trying to get to the P&W export or even Duluth know about buckwheat issues with Japan. Soybeans, we talked about the expansion here, and it's a great crop, but it is an allergen, and in some markets, when it's admixed with spring wheat, it becomes an issue. So as we expand production of soybeans, there's going to be more onus on producers and elevators to keep that separated. Glyphosate residues, pre-harvest burn down, it's a big issue in Italy. Japan is starting to ask questions, as well as some of the U.S. market, so that's one to keep an eye on. And then, I think a bigger one is this increasing U.S. and international customer interest in sustainable, environmentally friendly, regenerative labels. Who defines it? What is going to be the cost to you as growers, and how can we pass back more of that premium to you as a grower for producing under those guidelines? And trade, I think we need to re-engage trade talks in South Asia. That's our growth market. The current administration has been pretty slow on a lot of that, and I think for us as spring wheat producers, we need to push that. A few last slides here on the spring wheat class. I'm a quality guy, and we can't turn our back on quality. When I talk about quality protein levels, we need to maintain that 14 to 14 and a half type protein. Years like this cost us market share. Obviously this year is an anomaly due to drought. The other is dough strength. We need our wheats to be 12 to 15 minute stabilities. Obviously this year with the drought we picked up, but that's an area we need to continue to maintain. Water absorption. If you have 100 pounds of flour, or 2 bags of 100 pounds of flour, and the baker can get 10% more loaves out of the one because of higher water absorption, that's where he's going to buy his wheat. Okay, I'll speed it up here. So if we look at Canadian wheat right now, they have about a 1 to 2% absorption advantage. Low volume, had a big drop off this year, but hopefully we can kind of continue to press the bar on that. So in summary, we have a very good base to work with hardwood spring wheat. We've got a class premium, price premium, and we can't lose that. Our growth trend is clean labels, as well as the South Asian market. And I think we as producers need to stay engaged on these discussions about what is sustainable, regenerative, what do those labels mean, and what's the value to you as a grower. So with that, any questions? Thanks.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'm not going to let Pat get off quite so easy. I mean, it was a little short there, but so I guess we're going to also open it up for questions. I think, Green, we have a microphone. So at any time, raise your hand, and while I ask a few questions, Green will certainly flag you down, and you can ask those questions. But so Pat, kind of on, of course, we're here at Prairie Grains. We talk about spring wheat, but you can touch on soybeans or corn or whatever you like too. But so what do you see as far as basis? Or we talk a lot about logistics, like transportation. And, what are you seeing in, I suppose, especially spring wheat, but some of the other commodities too?
Yeah, I mean, so far this fall, we've seen pretty aggressive basis numbers that a lot of us haven't seen in maybe a lifetime. So there's been a lot of grain that's moved off the combine because prices were so good. You take a look at beans, and we're primarily up here. We're P&W corridor bean shippers, and our shipment period is usually September through maybe first half February. And with South America coming on, it looks like they're going to have a record crop. I really don't foresee why around here we'd have a better bean basis than we have today. It's going to be more of a domestic processor market and maybe a Mexico market.
Okay. So maybe a little more towards Jeff. it sounds like what your specialties are and break evens. December is a month for a lot of farmers, and I'm sure you're already meeting with some year-end things, but I'm sure a lot of them are talking about what to do next year. Are you seeing with the rise of input costs? Do you see farmers trying to make decisions on changing their rotation based on input costs, or are you starting to see some of that already?
Well, it never fails, when people start changing the rotation, to follow the markets that a lot of times end up getting burnt. But, with our higher input costs that we have today, I've been trying to stress, you should be a little more aggressive with some forward marketing right now. If you take a look at the levels where we're at for September, December wheat, we're at profitable levels. I do not think it's a bad time to, I'm not saying sell your whole crop, but I'm saying probably sell some of it. Rework the market with the price that we have. Our inputs are awful high, and we know what's going to happen if fertilizer comes down, or fertilizer keeps going up like it is, and our markets drop. We're going to be really hung hard. So we have to be very, very careful to control our expenses and to try to control some of our inputs.
Okay. Again, Kareem, and I think we've got a couple mics around. Just raise your hand at any time, and we'll go to you. And we do have a question. Okay, go ahead.
Question for Tom. You said the crushing plant in. Tom, you said the crushing plant in Crookston is to be like 240 tons per day. You said the crushing plant.
Thanks a lot.
I'll repeat it. I can hear you.
Crushing plant in Crookston, 240 tons a day. I know Northwood had a crushing plant that was smaller that probably didn't become feasible. Is yours going to be subsidized somehow if it's not economically feasible so it can continue?
So Tom, you maybe want to repeat kind of what he was asking there?
So the question is around the crushing plant in Crookston that we're helping to work on. So it is only a 240 ton a day plant. So that's about 7 to 8 truckloads a day. And most plants of that size have a really hard time surviving. We've seen these plants. In fact, this plant, the crushing equipment inside this plant was actually purchased from way down south from a plant that didn't survive because it was small. What makes this plant different and survivable is the fact that the entire structure is a non-for-profit. So we don't have to pay back dividends to any owners. The goal is that the profits that are made actually go back into the facility and that are also granted to other organizations that have new ideas, whether it's a new idea coming out of a university or a small startup company, a small seed company from anywhere on the planet. And we're getting phone calls from those kind of people from all over the world saying, wow, you have a facility that we can actually hire to do that. So there's a lot of interest in it. Yes, we started this off with a grant from the Minnesota State Legislature. So last year they granted $5 million to kick this off, and we're out fundraising from private companies to help us along the way as well. Because otherwise, you're right, it would be very, very difficult to keep these initiatives running in the face of these much, much larger plants and have a better opportunity to crush margins. The other thing about this plant that makes it special, though, is that we intend to be into that higher value markets, so food grade, non-GMO, organic, and so that will also differentiate us from what these small plants have tried to do in the past, which was just try to run conventional beans.
Any other questions out there? Missy?
Jim, just wondering about the gluten-free celiac phenomena, and wondering if we believe that's had a significant impact on hard red spring demand the last few years.
Good question. And I guess Eric Olson with our staff is kind of the one that follows the domestic market more, but in recent visits with her, the gluten-free celiac, some of that seems to be dying out a little bit, but certainly 5-10 years ago, it did have an impact because you saw a lot of companies, big prominent wheat milling companies and bakeries were actually selling gluten-free products at the same time as, you know, they're producing gluten products. So on a positive note, yeah, that seems to have kind of capped out. It's probably not having as big an impact. So that's why I think, you know, the clean label, you know, refrigerated frozen doughs have kind of offset that a little bit. And then I think, you know, some of the products, and you know, we've got a lot of growers in North Dakota that grow pulse crops as well. And, you know, a lot of those were going into, you know, gluten-free pastas and that type of thing. So as producers, you know, they kind of have two markets they're going in. But yeah, no, it definitely did have, you know, an impact there for a period, but it seems to have kind of died out a little bit.
So, Karine, I think you had a question over there.
This question is for Jim. I'm from northwestern North Dakota. When should I sell my wheat and durum? Or to follow that up, I know like in pulse crops they've told us that other countries get their money for them after the first of the year. So does that work that way with other countries for buying wheat and possibly durum too then after the first of the year where we can look forward to some exports? Or can that happen at any time?
So when you say money, you like a Social Security check or something? A government? Oh, okay. I guess I misunderstood your question, but I think, you know, and maybe we can turn it to the merchandiser too, what his thoughts are on prices. But on, you know, the spring wheat side, we are starting to see a little bit of stronger export pace for our spring wheat, and so there is more optimism for after the first of the year. The Russia export grain tax is going up to almost $2.80 a bushel after the first of the year. There's talk of a quota. So, you know, that's going to open the door for us, primarily our hardwood winter, competing into Africa and the Middle East. For us as spring wheat producers, Canada, you know, is in really tough shape in terms of available crop, more so on durum than spring wheat. And I don't know if there's any, you know, you're probably a durum producer, but addressing the audience. And I think our factor that will help us more is if Australia continues to have quality issues, that's going to open up some more protein demand in South Asia. But do you have any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with your statements there. I think it's a little further down the curve. We're going to see some demand for good quality spring wheat. Like you said, the Australians, they're going to have a big crop, but the quality is not going to be there. So the world's going to probably have to turn to the U.S. for some good quality spring wheat.
Any other questions out there? Just raise your hand, and we'll get to see a few hands up behind you, Karine, and in front of you. Yeah, go ahead.
Question on the new crushing plants going up. Do you think in northwestern Minnesota, northeastern North Dakota, is it going to help the basis on soybeans? And if so, by what amount?
Well, what's basis on average? About $1 under. So why are those crushing plants coming to this area? So they're coming to this area because of that. So they're going to quickly solve their own problem, I think, or they hopefully will quickly solve or delete their own opportunity, which is good for you guys, right? So no, I'm positive that your basis is going to strengthen with these crush plants coming in to North Dakota. There's just no way around it. There'll be a lot more competition for your beans. There'll be an annual flow of beans. I think it's going to give you opportunities for on-farm grain stores that you've not had before. I know it's not necessarily the business model that a lot of grain companies have been built on, but I do think it'll give you opportunities like southern Minnesota and Iowa have had for decades.
I lost track of Missy, but so somebody have a question?
This is for the grain merchandiser from Nolan. Do you foresee any protein scale for spring wheat on the horizon?
No, I think this year, probably not. I mean, we did have a pretty high protein crop, so I don't foresee it in the foreseeable future.
Any more out there? Oh, we got one way up front here. Okay, Karine, you got somebody? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to backtrack a little bit. You mentioned that Brazil had a record crop. I guess it's kind of hard to tell, but is that going to drastically affect our prices in the future? I know it's a long time until we have a harvest or if we get a crop, but do you think that'll drastically affect our market prices for soybeans?
I don't think it's going to affect the old crop too much. Where you're going to probably see it is if it is a big crop, it'll have a longer tail, which will come into our big shipping season in September and October. So if that does happen, I would expect that, yes.
Missy, go ahead.
Just for Jeff. With these input costs, you look at phosphorus from China and these chemicals all going up. Where do you foresee these things? They'll never get back to where they were. Even if they come out down to 3/4 of the cost of what they normally would. Boy, the price there going to have to stay up for us to make this stuff.
We've seen this many times in the past. We've seen it in the 70s, we've seen it in the 90s, where the input prices go way up, crop prices go up. What happens? The crop prices go down, inputs stay high, and we're in a struggle situation again. And I can see that happening again, I really can, because I can't see where fertilizer prices are going to dip this time. I really can't. I mean, we did see it one other time in 2012 when we went into fall with very high fertilizer prices, and then come spring we saw the prices drop, and a lot of high-priced fertilizer was bought in the fall. I honestly think now, especially with China, the trouble we're having with China, we're not going to see phosphate put on. Phosphorus, excuse me.
Yeah, all those guys have to do is turn off the heat.
Yep.
We don't we're not producing anything here in the United States. We got it.
And you got to remember where we're at as well. We're at the end of the chain. So we are the last ones that are going to get fertilized. So we're kind of at their mercy. We really are. And I want to address that question that was asked earlier about the Brazilian crop. If you remember last year at this time, they predicted a record Brazilian crop again. I mean, every year they always predict a record crop. You got to remember that Mato Grosso is probably the first state that they'll be harvesting soybeans in Brazil, and they will not be harvesting until probably the end of this month, first couple weeks in January. So I mean, a lot of things can happen between now and then. So we could see a real long tail on this.
I think a question in the back.
What is going on with milling wheat in Paris? Is that something to be looking at? Or?
I didn't catch in where?
In Paris?
Paris?
Yes.
Okay, Paris.
Was the question what's going on with milling wheat in Paris? So you're talking like price trends or just availability?
I heard a gentleman say that it was all-time high. Is that true? As far as the price of it compared to 2008?
Well, and I guess I'd have to look at the specific records. I know they have, the Russian export tax is having an impact on European values. They've also, are seeing competition for acres for oilseed crops as well. So I'm not sure if it's at a record high, but they have seen some strengthening because they're the first country to benefit, Europe is, from the Russian slowdown. And then it would be, some mid-quality Australian wheat or, U.S. Arctic winter and those type of wheats. Do you have anything?
We have another one in the back. Go ahead. We're okay. We got a few minutes left here. So maybe along the lines of Jim, you talked about the exports and spring wheat and fairly steady market, that we have overseas. You talked about historical trends, but do you see anything that changes in the future? I know every once in a while you hear about TPP, and of course the United States was in that early, and then Trump administration took us out of that. Do you see more bilateral agreements possibly in Southeast Asia, or what do you foresee as a trend?
I mean, as I said, South Asia, we need to re-engage more in that Asian region, and, fortunately, the Trump administration did push to get us back on an equal playing field with Japan, because we were at a disadvantage to Canada and Australia, and if that would have been resolved, that would have been a much tougher situation. But, in terms of the TPP, China's obviously trying to make a very big footprint in that region. Canada and Australia are competing, so, the ideal way to go is multi-country as opposed to bilateral. But, if it's getting things started, even that would be the first good get-go. And I don't know if anybody else, Tom, do you have any comments in that area?
Hey, we do have another question out there. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's over here. This is a question for Jeff. You referenced, I'll go back to what Daryl Richardson said. He said history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And you referenced 70s, 80s, and it seems like there's a lot of the same ingredients in place now that there were during that time, except for interest rates yet. What does ag country see as far as, do they have a crystal ball that they do projections? What are they looking at as far as when interest, not if, but when are interest rates going to start climbing?
There's no real crystal ball for the interest rates, but we recently took a reduction in interest rates again. A country did. Can't really foresee it, but we all know that at these interest rates, they're not going to go much lower. So we're going to have to see a little increase, I would say, in the near future with interest rates. And if we put on high interest rates on top of high input costs, on top of high land prices, I mean, it's going to be a bad day. It really is.
I think we got another question out there. Go ahead.
There was some talk about a fertilizer plant being built, I don't know if it is around Grand Forks someplace. Is that going to be online? And I think there was something connected with the Chinese building it. Maybe there's some comments on that.
Anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, with the relationships we have right now with China, I can't see where they're going to really bend too far to help us out. But money's money to the Chinese, so you never know what's going to happen.
Anything else? Lost track of there. Let me see. Well, we're getting, if there is no others, I mean, we're getting close to our time limit that we're allotted for this session. So we really appreciate all the expertise for our panel. Let's give our panel a big hand. Thank you all for all your questions, and enjoy the rest of the Prairie Grains Conference.